Allow me first to sincerely thank the organizers of the Road Forum and you, Mr. Yakunin, in particular, for inviting again UNESCO at this important international annual rendezvous with so many and diverse profiles. Our two institutions are partners who share the conviction that current global challenges require urgent attention and action to ensure peaceful coexistence among and between nations, civilizations, and cultures through a genuine and daily, and I underline the word daily, dialogue. Last November, Mr. Yakunin, you have signed with Mrs. Bokova, our Director General, an agreement to jointly explore possibilities for future cooperation in such areas as the review of formal and non-formal educational practices to integrate the principles of intercultural and interreligious dialogue. I inform you later this afternoon, we are going to speak a little bit more on these dialogue schools with the help of Marieta Stepaniats, Helena, and other scholars and teachers. The second area is the enhancement of research in the field of the social and human science. The third area is the promotion of intercultural and interreligious dialogue through cultural initiatives. And the fourth area is the building of communication and information institutions respectful of cultural diversity. Let me briefly recall the UNESCO's comparative advantage within the UN family dealing with our very topic. As you all know, the central objective of the United Nations, and therefore of UNESCO, is to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. This humanistic worldview is encapsulated in the UNESCO's constitution when it affirms that, and I quote, a peace based exclusively upon the political and economic arrangements of governments would not be a peace which could secure the unanimous, lasting, and sincere support of the peoples of the world, and that the peace must therefore be founded, if it's not to fail, upon the intellectual and moral solidarity of humankind. To obtain such solidarity, peace must be supported by a firm and passionate commitment to non-violent behaviors. In other words, a culture of peace is a process sustained by intercultural dialogue, innerving spontaneous as well as reflexive, daily again attitudes conducive to harmonious coexistence within and among our de facto multicultural societies. As peace should never be taken for granted, one core mission of UNESCO is to promote and foster the idea that lasting peace is not merely the absence of war, signaled by the silence of arms and the signings of treaties. Peace is possible only if its underlying values are appropriated by individuals and communities so as to live together, accepting differences of culture relating to gender, religion, ethnicity, and language. That is why UNESCO was designated as the lead United Nations agency for the implementation of all resolutions relating to the culture of peace and dialogue. That is why it is again designated as lead agency for the new decade, International Decade for the Rapprochement of Cultures, which was proclaimed last December and which goes from 2013 to 2022. We hope, Mr. President, that this new framework will give us a new opportunity to revitalize our cooperation. As the globalization process increasingly opens societies to each other and diversifies them internally, the new threats to peace are becoming political, social, economic, cultural, and environmental, and sometimes a mix of all. They can take the form of intra- or interstate tensions, which may turn into conflicts and wars. They can also take the form of transnational disease vectors, global terrorism, tsunamis, floods and droughts, water resources disputes, misuse of cyberspace. All those threats can combine and generate disruptive social transformations and traumatic human population movements. These phenomena impact the globalization processes all the more that they were not such dominant forces some years ago and drastically changed the conditions for building lasting peace. Growing awareness about humanity's vulnerability, as well as uncertainty and fear about the future, provide a fruitful ground for racism, xenophobia, and intolerance, human rights violations, and sometimes outright conflict. At the same time, people continue to hope and strive for dignity and a better future, as demonstrated by the latest political developments in Yemen and elsewhere. Our directions for reflection and actions are twofold. First, fostering a culture of peace and dialogue for sustainable, inclusive societies, and two, enhancing local and global citizenship conducive to rapprochement of cultures and peoples. These emerging issues challenge public policy today, which has to rethink its strategies for living together in peace. And they launch us two challenges. The first one is a conceptual one. UNESCO, with its partners, has to disseminate the positive daily values, attitudes, and behaviors afferent to the culture of peace, nurtured by an uninterrupted intercultural dialogue. In this end, the organization is determined to reinforce its action-oriented reflection in bringing continents, nations, communities, and individuals closer together, taking into account the special needs, their memories, and their aspirations. UNESCO is making special effort to widen spaces for dialogue by providing appropriate knowledge, skills, and tools with a view to fostering meaningful exchanges, and I underline again, meaningful exchanges, where people from different cultures can learn, unlearn, if necessary, understand, and trust each other in a world safe for all. We need to re-energize our commitment to the enhancement of cultural diversity, intercultural dialogue, cultural sustainable development, and the broad links between culture, human rights, and democracy, which have been forcefully articulated in various major documents and conventions of the UN system and are intensifying in the last decade. UNESCO contributes to deeper understanding of the epistemological relevance of the intercultural dialogue to develop inclusive policy. To this end, the nature of dialogue, the modalities, and obstacles have to be addressed in a more direct manner. The relevant question is always present. How can dialogue among cultures renew in today's world our approach to the methods of building peace in the minds of men and women? From the policy perspective now, UNESCO develops relevant strategies both in specific domains, education, culture, science, and communication, as well as jointly. Genuine international cooperation and partnerships are promoted in order to enhance human potential and capabilities, such as cultural literacy and intercultural competence for living together in freedom and equality, to better decipher the cultural environment. Formal and non-formal education preparing global citizens for their local and global responsibilities. By saying so, let me insist in 1 minute on the new emerging concept at the UN level, which is the global citizenship. In the context of the modern nation state, citizenship has been advanced as a constitutional cornerstone of liberal democracies and as a powerful ideological framework for regulating social interactions at the level of citizens in their relations with the state. At its most basic level, citizenship indicates membership of a political community with associated rights and duties. However, there is a new pressing challenge as to how best to accommodate increased diversity with its underlying notion of difference articulated by minority groups or diversity in general, while maintaining an overarching sense of belonging and inclusion within the broader society. The challenge here is to ensure that cultural rights are protected without producing segregated communities and a weakened sense of belonging to the wider society. In other words, the dilemma is how can we reinforce pluralism at the cultural and religious levels without necessarily erecting new forms of mutual exclusion and intercultural tensions? We follow the intellectual argument made within the theories of global citizenship and cosmopolitanism, where the true binding glue for diverse society does not only reside within nationalistic normative citizenship articulations, but rather within a more global approach emphasizing our shared human experience and aspirations. In other terms, global citizenship has been invoked in the context of increased levels of diversity, as I said, and in particular, it has been noted that existing local social policies do not always take into account the fact that many people in our digital era are nowadays connecting to transnational communities with deep transnational connections, allowing them to maintain collective cultural identities and practices. These and other political implications of transnationalism represent significant challenges to national conceptions of citizenship. Therefore, and in order to cater for these multiple identifications, new alternatives and often overlapping frameworks for citizenship have been explored and developed since the 90s, such as post-national, multicultural, and global citizenship. The emphasis here will be on global citizenship. The notion of global citizenship is a very broad and at times contested concept. This is because the very term seems to represent an inherent contradiction. Citizenship, in fact, implies a membership of and a belonging to a territorially defined nation state, whilst global invokes a sense of attachment to a global community that transcends the very essence of the state. Moreover, the notion of global citizenship, though increasingly prevalent in many policy and educational settings, is not as yet a legally binding concept. Therefore, the thrust of the substance for its pursuit will be drawn from the concept of cosmopolitanism, which is anchored in a discourse of universal ethics and an openness towards others. It is not cultural relativism at all. Therefore, in addition to membership of local and national communities, global citizens also subscribe to membership of a global community comprised of fellow human beings and not just fellow citizens. Taking all of this into consideration, the working definition would be, and I quote and I finish with this part, global citizenship concerns one's ethics and identity as a social, cultural, and economic being with rights and responsibilities to act not only locally and national, but most importantly, globally. Let me finish, Mr. President and dear friends, by saying and by reaffirming that our common responsibility is to act in our domains as lookout posts for the new challenges to lasting peace and to achieve prevention, mediation, and reconciliation, thanks to a vibrant and sincere intercultural and interreligious dialogue that should always be both respectful and truthful. Since this forum opened on October 2nd, which is the International Day of Nonviolence, marking the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, I will conclude with a quote by him which encapsulates the essence of dialogue. I quote, "I discovered in the earliest stages that pursuit of truth did not admit of violence being inflicted on one's opponent, but that it must be weaned from error by patience and compassion. Thank you for your attention.